friends! We're here for another week of virtual camp with Kate. I'm sitting here in front of my zinnia flowers, getting ready to talk to you about the weather. It is actually a pretty nice evening here in State College. It's been a very hot summer, and while it's warm out, there's not much humidity in the air. Humidity, warm, maybe those are some things we can talk about today when we learn about the weather. So let's go see what we can find out about the weather in our backyards. If you remember a few weeks ago, I had to film inside for a lot of virtual camp with Kate because I said they were taking down a big tree in our yard. Well, here it is. Now, I'm always sad when a big tree has to come down. This was a big oak tree, and by counting what we can of the rings, we think it was at least 100 years old. But this tree was completely rotten on the inside. So this is what was inside of it. It looks like really good soil, and I'm hoping to use some of it in my garden. But there were carpenter ants that had made a home in there, and they were hollowing out the tree. So if you look, we'll look down inside of it. Look at that. And there's actually been a squirrel making a home in here, or maybe not a home, but at least putting some nuts in here and sitting on it to eat. So that's what you're seeing there inside of this big stump. But if I try to reach my arm across, it doesn't go all the way across. That's how big this tree was. And if there had been a big windstorm, it could have fallen over and hit our house. Our house isn't too far away from here. There's our house. And it was tall enough that it could have hit our house. So we had to chop it down. I'm going to show you, I'll walk around so you can see the inside. I'm going to show you the other part of the tree that came down. My husband likes to make stuff out of wood, so he's saving what part of this tree he can. And he is going to get it cut into boards to make wood out of it. Unfortunately, a lot of the tree, like I said, was rotten, and so it can't be made into boards, but there are some pieces over here you can see that he will be able to do that too. But here's the inside. Look how deep that goes. He cut 8 feet to try to see how much of it was rotten, and it was rotten all the way through. So, like I said, if we hadn't taken this down, it could have hit our house. Look how big. Here, I'm going to hold my foot up so you can get another idea of how big this tree is. My foot is on the tree, and look how big it is. It was a really big tree. So we are going to plant some new trees in its place. Now, they probably in my lifetime won't get to be as big as this one, but hopefully there'll be big trees for someone in the future who wants to see them. All of these experiments I'm going to show you today are pretty awesome up close, but they might be hard to see on camera. So if you want to, you can do them at home. I tried to make it so that they were things that I just had around the house, easy to find and easy to use, and you don't need much of anything. So take a look at the materials, and if you can't see something and you think it's really cool and you want to try it at home, then gather your materials and give it a go. Look at our experiments for this week. So many things to do. So we're going to go ahead and get started learning a little bit more about the weather. Hello friends. So this week we're talking about weather, and so I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some of your words that you can find on the sheet in your backpack. So the first word is evaporation. If you remember, when we talked about cycles, we talked about the water cycle. And in the water cycle, evaporation takes place. It's when water turns into air or gas droplets and comes up into the clouds. So I'm going to draw the water cycle again because the water cycle has a lot to do with weather. So if you remember, in the water cycle, we have a nice lake down here on the ground. Maybe there's some fish in the lake. And when the sun heats up that water, it causes it to turn into gas droplets that evaporate up into the air. So this is evaporation. Then what happens is this water vapor that's floating into the air turns into clouds. And when the clouds get full and really heavy, then some of that water comes back to Earth in the form of either rain in the summer, which if you live here in State College, we really need rain. We haven't gotten a whole lot of rain. Or if it's winter and it's cold, it'll be ice or snow. And so this evaporation up in the clouds, the water condenses. Remember condensation. And then it becomes precipitation, which is rain or snow. If you remember when we talked about the wetlands, so let's say there's a nice wetlands with lots of nice plants over here, and it'll go downhill and all of this rain will flow back into this lake. And again, when the sun heats it up, it starts the process all over again. So we'll have evaporation, it'll condense into clouds, and then it'll rain, precipitation, and turn back into water and lakes on the ground. So this is what we call the water cycle. Which is part of why we have the weather that we do. So I have this hand sanitizer that I'm going to show you how to do a little bit of an experiment about evaporation. So if you put a little bit of hand sanitizer on your hand, you can see it, and you rub it together, the first thing you might feel is that your hands get kind of cool. That's because it is evaporating off of your skin. And then if you keep rubbing it in, you'll notice it disappears. Again, because it evaporated. So that's a fun little quick experiment you can do about evaporation. My hands are completely dry now because it all evaporated off of my skin. So for our first experiment, we're going to make some rain happen. So I have a nice clear bowl. I have a plate, and I have hot water that I put a little bit of blue food dye in, and some ice cubes. So what we're going to do is pour the water into the bowl, and we're going to put the plate on top of the bowl for just a few minutes. Now, if you remember, things called evaporation will start to happen, and we should see some water droplets on top of the plate pretty quickly. So we're just going to let that sit for a few minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, so just like the water cycle, I let this sit about 2 minutes, and you can see it has started to evaporate and then condense on the plate. It's a little hard to see the condensation, but there's some liquid dripping. So now what I'm going to do is, just like what happens in the atmosphere when the temperature changes, I'm going to put some ice. Uh-oh, my ice melted together on the plate. And all of you scientists out there should predict what you think is going to happen. If you notice, it's dripping. We made rain. So this is an example of what happens in our sky, in our atmosphere, when it rains. So, it's warm. Sometimes this is the way that it works. It's warm and it evaporates and condenses into the clouds, like we talked about. And if the temperature changes, it can cause precipitation to happen, which is like the drips of rain that we're seeing coming off of my cloud plate. This experiment might be a little hard to see, so I suggest that you try it at home because it's really cool. I can see it dripping pretty well, and it also is making kind of like a fog. So if you've ever been anywhere where there's fog, you know that this is the process that happens to make fog. There goes a big drip of rain right there. See it? There it went. Pretty cool. So the experiment I showed you where we made rain with the blue water in the bowl, that's actually what's happening today in our atmosphere. It's a nice hot summer day down here, and there's what's called a cold front, which was represented by the ice on top of the plate coming in. And what that's going to do is create some thunderstorms. And so I'm going to show you an experiment where you can see what it looks like in the atmosphere or in the air when a thunderstorm rolls in. All right, for this next experiment, we're going to try to make a tornado in a jar. If you want to try it at home, because it might be easier to see, you're going to need a canning jar with a lid. You could also use like an empty mayonnaise jar or peanut butter jar, just so it's clear so you can see in it. You need some water. I just refill this gallon water jug with water from my tap from our sink. You'll need vinegar and clear soap. So I just use our clear liquid hand soap. You can also use clear dish soap. If you want, you can add things like food coloring or glitter and make a glitter tornado, but it is up to you. Now, something that I think is interesting is I am afraid of tornadoes. I don't like tornadoes. They scare me. And so something that I think is pretty cool about science is you can learn more about things that scare you, and sometimes it helps you be a little bit less afraid. So we're going to make a tornado in a jar, and we're going to see how cool it is and maybe learn a little bit about tornadoes. So the first thing you'll do is you'll fill up your jar about 3/4 of the way, and you can see there's a little bit of soap in here still from when I was trying this experiment before. So fill it up about 3/4 of the way with water, and then you add a teaspoon of soap, it's best if it's clear soap, and a teaspoon of vinegar. You can kind of swirl your teaspoon measuring thing around in there to mix it up a little. And then put your lid on, nice and tight. Mix it up. And now we're going to try to make a tornado. So what you do is you swirl your cup around, and look at that. It is spinning, and it might be hard to see on camera, but there is a little tornado that forms in there. See it? Ooh, look at that. That is super cool. It even has some, like, tornadoes, when they move around, they'll pick up stuff off the ground, and there's little pieces of stuff in here. Like I said, if you want to use glitter or something to see that. But right down there, there is a mini tornado in my jar. Pretty cool. Definitely try this one at home if you have the supplies, because it's easy and it's really neat to look at close up. You know, the vocabulary words we have this week are so big. So the first one is evaporation, which I'll talk about in a minute, because I would like to share the water cycle, which has something to do with weather. If you remember, we talked about the water cycle a few weeks ago, and we'll talk about it again as it is related to weather. But the second word in our vocab list is thermometer. We are going to make a thermometer as our craft for this week. So a thermometer is an instrument that's used to measure temperature. I will show you, once I'm done talking about these other words, we'll go up and I'll show you our thermometer that's outside of our window that we use every day to be able to tell how hot or cold it is outside. The second word on your list is temperature. So remember, I said a thermometer tells you how hot or cold it is outside, which how hot or cold it is called a temperature. Here in the United States, we measure temperature in what are called degrees Fahrenheit. So if you see a little tiny circle next to an F, that means degrees Fahrenheit. Usually in the summer, we're going to be above 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then in the winter, we're going to be 40 or below for the true part of the summer and the true part of the winter. So that little degree Fahrenheit tells you what level of temperature or how hot or cold it is outside. And then the third word is meteorologist. Whew, that is a hard word to spell. Meteorologist is someone who studies the weather. So sometimes you'll see meteorologists on TV telling you what the weather forecast is for the next few days. But behind the scenes of that person that's on TV, there's a whole bunch of other people that are measuring things like temperature and wind direction and looking at a thing called radar that shows you where there are clouds and rain. And so meteorologists are behind the scenes of the TV as well, trying to predict what the weather is going to be for the next few days so that people can plan ahead. So they'll let you know if it's going to be hot and you need to make sure that you have enough water around, or they'll let you know if there's something like a big storm coming and you need to make sure you have supplies in your house so that you can stay safe. So meteorologists have a really important job of checking to make sure that what the weather is so that they can let people know and people can be prepared for whatever weather is coming. Here at my house, we have a few ways to measure the temperature before we even go outside. So the first is this thermometer here. This was here when we moved in. You can see it's a little over 80, about 82 degrees right now. And so it's in the shade. So when things are in the shade, they're usually a little cooler than when they're in the sun. But we can look at this to get an idea of what the temperature is outside before we even go outside. And then also down on our counter, we have one of these fancy computers that tell us all sorts of things, but we can ask it the weather. But then it also has a little sun icon and it says 85 degrees. So remember, I said the other thermometer was in the shade. So it was showing it a little bit cooler than it is outside. But these Google Home devices can also tell us what the weather is. And it says that it's a sunny day and it's 85 degrees. And it also shows us pictures of places we've been. This next experiment is the one featured on the back of your sheet for the week that has, you know, your instructions and your vocab words and things. This is a bottle thermometer. And so for this experiment, you're going to need a plastic or glass bottle. I just used one from my vitamin water. You're going to need a measuring cup, rubbing alcohol, and you can use any percent, but higher is better. Water. Again, I just got this from my tap. Food coloring, any color that you want. A plastic straw. And modeling clay. If you purchase the WPSU backpack, these will be in your bag for the week. If not, then any modeling clay will do. It doesn't have to be Model Magic. You will need a clear plastic straw for this to work though. And if you want, a marker to mark on the straw where the temperature is. So the first thing we're going to do is open up our bottle. And you're going to measure a 1/2 cup of water in your measuring cup. You're going to go ahead and pour that into the bottle. And then you're going to measure a 1/2 cup of rubbing alcohol. Again, any strength is good. And you're going to pour that into your bottle, mix it with the water. Then you're going to add about 10 drops of food coloring. I chose pink just because I like the color pink, but you can choose any color. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 drops. And if you kept the lid to the bottle, you can put it on to mix it up. My pink actually made a nice red color, which is good because thermometers usually are red, so that worked out well. All right, then you're going to take your straw and you're going to put it in the bottle. Now this part, you want to make sure that it is in the liquid, but there's still a little bit sticking out of the top. This is important because it's how it measures the air, all right? You'll take your modeling clay and your modeling clay is going to help the straw stay in place. So you're going to open up your modeling clay, kind of squish it a little. Now again, you want to make sure that your straw is sticking out a little bit, and you're going to hold it in the middle. You may need someone to help you because this can be kind of tricky. You want to make sure it's a little bit in the water and sticking out a little bit in the top and in the middle of your bottle. And then you're going to stick your modeling clay so that it's completely around the top of the bottle, holding your straw in place. All right, you can see my straw is sticking out of the middle, and the modeling clay is completely sealed around the top of the bottle, holding the straw in place. And the straw is submerged in the liquid, and actually it's already starting to measure the temperature. You can see it's pulling up the liquid. Pretty cool. All right, so now what you can do is, if you notice where it pulled up the liquid to, you can make a little mark on there and then come back in a few hours and see if the position has changed. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark. It's right about here. Nice big mark. And I'm going to let it sit, and we're going to see if we come back in a little bit if the position has changed. And that way you can measure the temperature. So I set our thermometer in the shade, and if you notice, so here is where it was when it was in the sun, and now the liquid's down here. So that means that it's cooler in the shade than it was in the sun. Pretty cool how that happened. I wonder what would happen if the weather got cooler, like at night. What would happen to the level of the liquid? You'll have to try it and send me a message and let me know. So another cool thing you can do is make a shaving cream cloud. So you need water, food coloring, and shaving cream for this one. And what you do is, first you pour some water, which represents our atmosphere or our air, into the jar. And then you stick some shaving cream on top, which makes it look like a cloud. Big white fluffy cloud in my case. And then you add some food coloring. There's already some swirling happening to the top of the cloud, and what's going to happen is it's going to make it look like rain is coming. Now my rain happens to be pink. Your rain can be any color you want. And we'll give it a few minutes and we should see, there it is. So this is kind of what what happens when rain comes out of a cloud. Let me hold up a piece of white paper behind it. It might make it easier to see. Yeah, there we go. You can see rain coming into the atmosphere out of our nice fluffy cloud. The cloud got heavy, temperature changed, and it started to rain. Another fun and easy experiment you can do at home. Did you ever lay on the ground and just watch the weather roll by? So it's a beautiful sunny day today, but there are some clouds rolling over. Good scientists like to make observations. So sometimes it's nice to just lay down and watch what happens to the sky. If it's a safe time to do it, of course. Well, we did some fun experiments this week. I hope you liked learning about the water cycle and how it helps make the weather that we have. And I hope you enjoyed learning about how to make your own thermometer that you can use to see how hot or cold it is outside. I think that we did some pretty good exploring today, and I'm looking forward to next week where we're going to do backyard explorations, and we can learn how to explore our own backyards a little more closely and see what we can find. I'll see you all next week. Until then, have a great week. Bye.